Okay, and we are live. King Crook Gaming. Nice to see you, bud. Looks like you're already joining in. That's awesome. So this meeting that I called today is all about why professional photographers don't switch systems. And by switch, I mean, let me do the air quotes here, switch systems. And the inspiration for this is that recently we have had a lot of YouTubers. I shouldn't say recently because this happens all the time. A lot of YouTubers say, "Oh, well, I'm switching from Canon to Sony. Or I'm switching from, Sony to Canon, and so on and so forth." And it tends to trail the announcements between these companies of new cameras involved. And a lot of it, my opinion here, is for clicks on YouTube. So it is inspired by recent YouTubers switching, and sometimes with YouTubers, their intentions aren't always transparent. Um, they may be working on deals behind the scenes with different manufacturers, and that has been happening a lot, especially with Sony. Sony is known to float a lot of gear to influencers to be able to market their brand publicly. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, Sony's a marketing juggernaut, and I have never seen Sony itself, or really many of these YouTubers who are switching over to Sony, do it in a negative way. And I don't see them bashing Nikon or Canon or Fuji or whoever they're switching to, even if they're on Sony's dole. Now, they aren't usually are not forthcoming about that, but I haven't seen them do it in a negative way. Instead, I've seen them do a positive spin on it, and that is to say, well, this Sony camera fits my needs implicitly, or this Sony camera does everything that you can get out of a or a Canon camera, rather, because we're shooting in RAW, or we're shooting in a 10-bit log format or something like that. And that goes into the deeper conversation of, does color science with cameras actually matter? And yes, of course it does. But sometimes in a non-virtuous type of way, these influencers are pulling the wool over the eyes of people a little bit. And that isn't in itself problematic, unless you take into account that the majority of people watching YouTube content around cameras, around techniques for photography and such, are beginners. They're either beginners or they are very early on in their journey with using cameras, or they're trying to attain that professional level. They're trying to attain the skill set and the client base to go out there and make a living with a camera. And so when you have YouTubers that are out here that switch to Sony, however, they're not disclosing why they have. And the reason behind the scenes is that a company like Sony is floating them gear to switch to Sony and then shout that from the rooftops. It's a bit disingenuous to these beginners who are just starting out. So I'm going to say all that to say that I am in the process of, and those of you who've seen my channel and been watching for a while know that for the past year or so, I've been in the process of pitting some top end Sony camera bodies against some top end Canon camera bodies to see if I could live with the RF mount system as my main mount for the commercial work that I do, which the vast majority of that is real estate. It's not all real estate. I mean, just even right now, I'm involved in uh, a project for a developer documenting different neighborhoods in a city, and then I'm also doing a little league baseball thing. And so, there's other things that I do within the realm of commercial photography that requires the gear be a little bit different than the day-to-day real estate stuff. And so, that's what I'm going to ultimately land on here is the amount of gear that you need if you're out there as a commercial photographer, and how that in itself is a barrier to switching systems. And so it's not quite so easy as a lot of these YouTubers would have it seem. So I am in the process of seeing if I can live just with an RF mount. And how did I get there? Well, for years, I had been shooting Sony. I'd been shooting Sony bodies. I ended up in my main workhorse on the daily right now is the Alpha One with the 16 to 35 G Master strapped on it. That's what I shoot the vast majority of most of my real estate work with, is that I always have backup bodies in the van. So my typical daily loadout right now would be the Alpha One, the A7 IV, and then the A7S3. So I'm shooting video on the S3. I'm shooting stills on the A1. A7 IV is kind of a backup to either one of those, in a pinch if I need it to be. Now, with RF lens mounts, I've been using RF lenses for a couple years. I started building the collection when I bought the red Komodo and quickly discovered how awesome these are. And my opinion here, this is somebody who uses all kinds of G Master lenses. I've got, I don't know, a dozen of them or so. I'm going to get into that. And now a whole bunch of RF-L series lenses. I think on balance, the RF lenses are better than the Sony lenses, the Sony G Master lenses. Where the Sony lenses really shine is they're smaller. They're smaller, they're lighter. That does have merit, depending on how your systems are. If you have bags that you're humping everything around versus myself, like I put everything in a van, it's not as important. But the Sony lenses are smaller and lighter for any given any given speed of any focal length. It's typically going to be a smaller lens. So, you know, this is where it starts to delineate between the people like myself who use this gear day in and day out and a YouTuber. And it really, there's two different reasons here why that's different and how it pertains to the I'm switching conversation. One is I am pragmatic about gear, right? So I am brand agnostic. I have Sony, I have Red, I have Blackmagic, and it doesn't matter to me what name is stamped on something. What matters to me is the capability of that gear to get the job done. That means I have collected a hodgepodge of things because not everything is great. Not any one thing is great at everything. You know, the things that we have in the world right now, the tools we have available in the world that are the best at everything right now, snapshot in time, would probably be the Alpha One and the Canon R5C. Those are the two cameras, and maybe that Fuji one too, the XH2S that they came out with. That one seems to be a good all arounder too, but I don't have any experience with that. So I'm pragmatic about gear, and that's why I don't and that's why professionals a lot of times don't say we're switching, because switching would imply that we're already living somewhere. We already, oh, I only shoot Sony or I only shoot, and just a lot of us aren't really like that. It's just we kind of, when something fits our need, regardless of what brand it is, that's what we get for that. So pragmatic about gear, a lot of professionals are that. And the other thing that a lot of professionals are is we are deep in gear. I mean, I have a pile of gear for Sony E-mount, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, from henceforth, only use Canon mounts. I'm going to use Canon RF mount, and that's the other thing too. Is like I look at this as lens mounts. I don't look at it as cameras because camera bodies, they come and they go, and it's the old adage, right? You date the camera bodies, you marry the lenses, right? So I want to just use Canon lens mounts from here on out. And why is that? Well, the first reason is because I enjoy shooting motion on Komodo. I started shooting Red Komodo a couple of years ago, when it was fairly new at the time. And I really love it. It is a fantastic camera system. It has the world's best app. It has the world's best raw codec, and it has a native RF lens mount. So why EF mount then? Well, EF mount is the EF lenses are kind of like the cockroaches of the world, right? You can adapt it to anything. It's solid. Right now I'm shooting on one of my newer to me Canon C200s with the 18 to 35 1.8 Sigma lens on it. I call that lens Cucaracha because everybody has one. So that's why Canon EF mount. I think I can fit all of my needs with all of those. The things that were keeping me into Sony up to this point, and especially talking about the A1 here more than anything, is the A1 has a unique set of features that are not found in any other camera, and that is the big one for doing real estate composites would be the 1/400th of a second mechanical flash sync. That is very advantageous, and if you don't know why it's advantageous, you can go take a look back at some of my past videos, and I can show you the technique of using a 1/400th flash sync shot inside to be able to balance window exposure with interior exposure, and it has to do with cranking ISO to get a small light, small strobe, a lot more powerful while still controlling the ambient window light with shutter speed. So that is a big reason for me right now to choose the Alpha One over every other camera on the planet because it is the best at that with everything else out there. The other thing is I really enjoy the Sony app. So the wireless tethering app in it, the Imaging Edge, it does everything I need it to do. It is pretty fast, especially with the case of the Alpha One. The range on it is vast. You know, you're not going to drop out with the Alpha One. So that's what keeps me into Sony right now. So for the past year or so, I've been kind of flirting with the different Canon bodies. You know, can I use it? How big of a deal is that 1/400th of a second flash sync? How bad is the Canon tethering app? And it's pretty bad, by the way. But you know, the reason why a lot of pros never really do this is because we have a lot of gear. So let me get into right here um, what all I am going to have for sale. And so I compiled a list of all of it. That's a lot of stuff, right? And these are only things that are Sony specific. And so they are Sony E-mount lenses or they are Sony battery grips and card readers and stuff. This is only it's ever going to be any value to Sony shooters, right? So if I go full on to Canon, all this stuff will be for sale. So I'll run it down here. Alpha One, these are camera bodies, the A7 IV, the A7S Mark III, the old rusty trusty A7 III. As far as lenses, I have two because I like to have backups of everything. 1635 G Masters. I have an 18 millimeter Zeiss Batis, 24 GM, 35 1.8, 50 millimeter f2.5. That's the little video lens, and I like it a lot, by the way. 50 millimeter 1.4, that is the Sony Zeiss co-branded one. The 55 millimeter 1.8, a lot of people like and have that lens. 85 millimeter 1.4 G Master, 70 to 200 GM, and the 100 millimeter Tokina macro, which I got on super fire sale. I never use it, but it's the perfect lens when I need it. In addition to that, I have 4 or 5 CF Express Type A cards in the 160 gigabyte denomination, probably about 8 Z batteries and a card reader. So how much stuff is that exactly? So what I did was I totaled up now everything on this list. You can get brand new still. So here's the retail value of that stuff in my Sony loadout is $32,450. Okay, now taking a look at that, okay, I'm going to be, it's used. A lot of this stuff holds its value pretty well, but let's just say 50 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollar that I could reasonably sell this private party, right? So that's still $15,000 worth of gear. Now, if you keep in mind that I have a need for all of this stuff in my daily work, okay, $32,000 worth of Sony gear. I'm going to have to replace this because I still have that need with the Canon equivalent. And so you figure, okay, so I'm going to have about $32,000 if I buy a brand new of Canon equipment because it's competitively priced, a lot of it between the two systems. Um, but I'm only selling it for 15,000, right? And so I am spending $15,000. Am I losing $15,000? Absolutely not. And the reason I'm not is because all of the things on this list have earned me 10 times more than I ever paid for them. Right? Over the years that I've been using this stuff out there working professionally as a photographer. But it is still a $15,000 proposition. Any way you look at it, right? And that is the main difference why professional photographers don't just go out there and switch systems. So I would caution everybody as you're watching YouTubers to say, I'm switching to this, I'm switching to that. Just, keep in mind, it's like, is this guy out there working, or is he on the Sony dole, or is he a YouTuber that perhaps doesn't have $32,000 worth of worth of gear in this system that, because it's not so easy to swap out. And especially if you look at this pragmatically, like I do, and like a lot of professional photographers, what am I getting when I go over to like a Canon system that I'm not here? Well, that's the last thing I want to address, and then I'm going to get into some comments. Hey, James Jackson, good to see you, man. Uh, what am I getting when I go over to this? Well, there's been a conversation recently amongst real estate photographers in the real estate photography community as our business has slowed down a lot. And most of us don't just do real estate, but I primarily do real estate. Okay. And one of the other gentlemen who has really been big in this discussion is Jeremy Deal. And James, I'm switching to Kodak. Yeah, right. Okay, whatever, dude. um, Jeremy Deal also has a wedding photography branch of his business. Okay. I also do other commercial work. Like I said, I'm doing the Little League Baseball thing, I'm doing the documenting of neighborhoods thing, and all that. But it's causing a lot of us to rethink, not that I always want to do real estate, and I'm good at it and I have the client base for it. And I always want to have that be my main thing. But what this has caused a lot of us to do is it's been easy pickings over the past few years. And it's caused a lot of us to rethink our whole business plan and say, you know, I need to have a backup. I need to have something where I can easily transition over to this other genre in the times of down real estate markets. Or, real estate is cyclical anyway, so this time of year is typically our slowest time of year anyway, around the holidays and through the first quarter of the new year. It just, not a lot happens in the real estate business during that time. So part of that discussion with me and part of that changeover is I've been using Sony cameras in the Sony system primarily for about 5 years. In that time, a lot has happened with other manufacturers that I don't really have my ear to the ground with. But Canon especially has really caught up, and I would argue in the case of their lenses, especially their RF lenses, has surpassed that Sony is doing with their E-mount, even top-end G Master lenses in a lot of ways. And so as part of this reinventing myself, new year, new me kind of stuff, right? January 1st is I'm going to, for creative purposes, switch over. I can afford to do it. I mean, that's the other thing that needs to be mentioned. Not everybody can afford to do this, especially if you're looking at $32,000 worth of stuff. But I can afford to do it. I can afford to do it as a move to get my creative juices flowing, right? I've been using this gear for so long. Using this gear, it's going to be better. Going over to a Canon gear versus Sony gear, or any of two manufacturers that you want to talk about. The new thing is going to be better than the old thing in some ways, and it's going to be worse than the old thing in some ways. And if nothing else, what that does is it forces you to creatively approach things in a different way, if that makes sense. So let me get into some of the comments. Looks like I have several people watching now, so thanks for joining, everybody. King Crut Gaming. Let's see. I'm going to bring you up here. Oh, that is sample comment. All right, there we go. Pro photographers don't change systems because they stay in their comfort zone. Yeah, there's something to say about that too. That's definitely worth mentioning. So, especially sports photographers are like this, and I think when we're talking about Canon, especially, and them. going to the R3. The R3 is a strange camera, and I think what the R3 is, and what a lot of people think the R3 is a camera that approximates a 1DX Mark II. And the reason that they put that camera out is to get all of these pro sports photographers, especially the old men with the big DSLRs that are, strapped all over them at pro sports games, into the mirrorless system and to sell them RF lenses, right? So it's like, hey, look, you can buy three R3s instead of three 1DXs. And look at this RF glass. We have long glass now, and it's better than the EF ones. And so, yeah, I think photographers definitely stay in the comfort zone. Like I just said, part of this for me is going out of that comfort zone as a means to get my creative juices flowing, and find commercial value in that. And so, yeah, I absolutely agree. King Kruk Gaming again. Just to be ironic, you should title this "Why I'm Leaving Sony" with a disturbed face, also for the clicks. you know, I really don't want to clickbait this stuff, but I'd rather have a deeper discussion like this. I am getting rid of my Sony kit. It's nothing that's wrong with the Sony kit. It's just that I've been using it for years and years. I've been using it for years and years. I'm a little bit bored. It's like I got into photography because I'm passionate about it, and if you're using the same stuff over and over, especially if you're shooting the same kind of stuff over and over, it's like, just give me something different. That's all. It's not that anything's better or anything's worse. It's just different. Okay. James Jackson, what up, bro? What up, James? How you doing, man? So what are you doing these days? Now, James Jackson, all of you should go and check out his channel. I know he's big on the Canon stuff. I think he's using the C70 as his main body. Um, I very much considered C70s also. I recently, though, picked up on the super fire sale that's happening right now, a pair of C200bs for 2,500 bucks a piece. It's crazy. I have zero doubt in my mind that a C70 is a better, more featured camera than the C200, but $2,500. That is a crazy price for a whole lot of cameras. So that's why I did that. And then James, I'm switching to Kodak. Here's why. You know what's funny? Like all of us should do a video like that, right? I'm switching to Polaroid, you know, because the film is going to be worth $1 million someday. We should see that should be like the April Fool's joke from like all of the photography channels is how they're switching to something. Because it's so cliche. Everybody is doing all that nonsense these days. Okay, Paul Rebel. Am I saying that right? Rebel, I would say. Paul Rebel Photography, good to see you, bud. There's a certain YouTube couple from the East Coast. I think everybody knows who that is. The continuous switch between Canon, Sony, Nikon seriously gets old quick. I I think that, in fairness, I think that couple, um, first off, I mean, they've been doing it a long time. And for those of you who don't know, I'll call them out. For those of you who don't know who they're talking about, he's talking about the Northrops, Tony and Chelsea Northrop. Um, they've been doing it a long time, and I don't, I stopped watching their channel too because, yeah, part of it's because of that. I don't know. I just lost interest on there. I'm gonna leave it at that. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that does get old. Okay, Sid Vicious, good to see you, Sid. You are right. Most people don't switch. It's because in the field, you have to know your gear. Yeah, you know what? I didn't really get into that, but that's a good point. And that's really one of the reasons why it took me so long to do. And I was on a live stream with Carlos Quintero recently where we're kind of talking about this. He's Carlos has kind of been on the warpath um, uh, uh, regarding a certain other YouTuber who recently has switched to Sony and for reasons that are trivial to Carlos, it seems. So, but I didn't just wake up and decide to do this. That is a hugely important takeaway from this is because Sid, you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to know what you're doing with this gear, and so that means when I first get the seed in my head, I could maybe switch to this other system. I've got, like, we were just talking about, I've got $32,000 worth of Sony stuff, and I know how to use every single thing on there very well. In order to acquire that comfort with a new system, it takes time, and so you don't just do it. I first got an R5, then I got an R5C. Well, first I started collecting RF lenses with the Red Komodo that I was shooting on. Got to learn, the behavior of those lenses, the look of the lenses, and so forth. Um, then I got an R5 and an R5C, and I was using those tools side by side with my Sony Alpha tools for a few months out there, shooting paid work with both of them, always having the Sonys in the van. If I was out shooting the Canon for that very reason, it's like, hey, if I get stuck with this thing, if the battery life is as bad as they say it is, if something janks out, if there's a setting that gets tweaked and I'm not familiar enough with the menu system yet to understand what to do quickly in order to get it back to the way I want it. I need a backup. So yeah, absolutely. You get used to working with what you're working with, and you need to be proficient with the gear. You're not testing gear on clients' time. So yeah, that's a good point. It takes a while because of that. Let's see. James Jackson, about to do a passion project in a week. So I've been focusing on that during this downtime. Yeah, there's one good thing about this downtime for us in real estate, and that's that. Like for me, I started doing this. I started YouTube live streaming, and I've got my whole live streaming set up now. And why was I able to do that? Well, because it's not like last May, last June, 2022, where I was doing 12-hour days, 6 days a week, just trying to keep up with the real estate load. I can't do this stuff then. I'm tired. And I've got young children, and a wife. And it's like so yeah, the downtime's good for this kind of stuff. Let's see. Home run trot. Hey, good to see you. I'm a Sony user. You mentioned you lose and gain things in the Switch. What are gaining by making the move to Canon? And do you think Canon will be the better product long term? I think that it goes back. It's a good question. I think it goes back to the thing about marrying the lenses and dating the bodies, and I will answer your question, but just in general, whatever you lose and gain with any camera body, it's important, I think, to realize that these things come out at such a quick clip these days, and they're so competitive one manufacturer to the next that the lenses are going to be what you're left with. So whatever the R5 or the R5C or whatever does today or doesn't do today, when the R5 Mark II comes out, or the fabled R1 comes out, or whatever new APS-C, it's going to do different things, and it's going to do better things than the one you have now. What remains the same is you still have those lenses for that lens mount. So, but to answer your question, you lose things, gains. What are you gaining by making the move to Canon? So, um, a lot of the Canon workflow is just different, and I do when I'm locked off and I'm shooting composites on interior, I do a lot of tethering, right? So I'm always wirelessly tethering to my iPad. And so how the apps work, the native apps between the two systems, or the different wireless tethering options that are available, like Cam Rangers and like the Arsenal thing. And I think Tether Tools has one now, the Tether Tools Air Pro X or whatever it is. They're tethering systems. um, how those work are important to me, and there are vast differences between the Canons and the Sonys. A couple things I like with the Canon, probably the main thing I like with the Canon over the Sony is I like their focusing tool. So when you're manual focusing, you could define the point that you want it to focus on. You can then have the arrows that come into line. When you learn how to use that tool, and Sony doesn't have anything like that, neither does anybody else. That's a unique Canon thing. You can work really quickly like that. I also like on the Canon app how you choose values between the shutter speed and aperture and ISO and all that, how it has a scale on the bottom, and it kind of looks like a ruler. And so the big lines are full stops, and then it has little lines between them that are delineations. I think how you set it up. So mine's in 1/3 stop increments between the full stops. And so it's just a nice visual way to be able to track if you're trying to balance settings. Like, for instance, if I increase my ISO, if I go from 100 to 200 ISO, because I want my light that I'm using to be more powerful. And so I increase the ISO. I now have to be able to control my exposure, my ambient light, my window light by increasing shutter speed. And so I want one stop up with the ISO value. So I need to go one stop faster with the shutter speed. And just the way that that visually is represented with the Canon app, I really enjoy. Another thing that I enjoy with the Canon app specifically is that I can leave the preview mode, the preview, I shouldn't say preview, the image that I just took. So the display of the image that I just took, I can leave it up on the screen. So when I'm flash popping, right? So if I have a strobe that I'm firing over here, window in front of me, and a strobe that I'm firing over here, I do that so I can then mask the reflections against each other in post when I'm compositing, right? So with the Canon app, I can leave that image on there on the screen. So then I fire the flash. I can see that preview the image I just took. Go over, fire the flash. I go straight from that one to that one without having the live view in between. It's little things like that, and these are the little things that are going to be unique to all of our workflows. You're going to have those little things with your workflow that are going to be different than mine. But, another thing that I've found is when you work professionally with these tools, your needs aren't typically well represented by YouTube reviewers because they're not like I've never seen anybody do that on a YouTube video, but it's important to me. You know, I hope that answered your question. It's just they're just different, but I think more importantly than they're different and one of them has features that the others don't is you need to love these lenses because all these cameras are going to change every year. Mike Harden, problem with I'm switching. Oh, Mike, good to see you, by the way. Problem with I'm switching videos. People may have bought into a system based on certain people's recommendations. Then 6 months later, they now says the system sucks, and it's a bit of slap in the face. And that I think goes back to um, YouTubers maybe being a little bit disingenuous. For the reasons that they're switching. It just and also, like I said, I think the vast majority of people consuming camera content on YouTube are not working pro photographers who have the experience to be able to discern for themselves who's full of it and who isn't. So that's a shame. When people do that. Said I saw that 2,500 sale is ridiculously. I know, So he's talking about the Canon C200s, which is I'm filming on a C200 right now. Um, this was an $8,000 camera when it was brand new, and it is about a 4 or 5 year old camera now, but it is still a raw cinema workhorse with everything built in. And 2,500 bucks, which is what B&H is blowing them out right now. Take a look at my last video I just did. I think it's going to be ahead of a Canon Cine announcement. I don't know what that's going to be, but I have no idea why every C200 SKU is just being completely blown out right now. Fire sales. So it's a great opportunity for people. Yes, 2,500 for a C200B is highway robbery. I'm telling you. New C200 coming, new something coming. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, either Canon or B&H or whoever thinks the existing C200, the ones that I just bought, isn't going to look very attractive in comparison. So you know what I think? I think they learned their lesson with Red. When Red and I'm somebody who got stuck with a DSM C2 Dragon X that I owned at the time that the Komodo came out, and all of a sudden, all the DSM C2 bodies are worth their doorstops now, and B&H is still trying to sell the Red Dragon 6K kit for like 16,000 or something like that. Good luck. The Komodo's a better camera in most ways. It's a third the price, you know. So I think that's what they're doing. Ribel? Oh, Ribel. Okay, Ribel. I'm gonna remember that. I said Rebel. I guessed Rebel. I guessed wrong. Sid switching to a white box with a hole in it. I don't want to know what you do with boxes with holes in them, but let's see. King Krut Gaming. I'm making the same move as you. I'm going to Canon glass, thus going full red. The C200 sounds good, but I have zero EF glasses for La Cucaracha. So somebody else is onto the lock. So I call the 18 to 35 the APS-C lens, the 1.8 Sigma. La Cucaracha, because, and that's what I'm filming on right now is La Cucaracha because everybody has one, right? Just like La Cucarachas. And and the reason everybody has La Cucaracha is because it's a hugely good value. I mean, it's not the best lens on earth, but it's good. Like it's a good lens, and they're seriously like you can get them on sale for like $500, right? It's La Cucaracha. Everybody's got one. Tony and Chelsea tend to stretch the truth. Eh, I don't know. I don't know if they, I think they are some of the lesser egregious stretchers of truth if they do. You know, I don't know. They're a likable couple. I think they're a likable couple. They're like the who are the home remodeling people. You know who I'm talking about. They're just likable people. Carlos is the goat for calling people out by name. No, he actually doesn't call people out by name too much. He's done, especially with his last few videos, he's done a lot of kind of tiptoeing around, not calling the gentleman out that most of us know who he is. Um, he's been pretty good about that. Brandon Brody, hey, good to see you, man. As a R5C and C70 owner, I still admit that the FX3 A7S3 is a much better tool for real estate videos. Um, yeah, I'll yeah, I agree with that. The dynamic range, low light, and being much lighter than C70. Um, the A7S3 FX3 cameras, their Achilles heel, and all the Sony video cameras for that matter, their Achilles heel is that okay, everybody always says how good they are in low light. And really what they're basing that on is that you've got that second native gain stage all the way up at 12,800 and that the camera cleans up considerably when it's at 12,800. But the problem with that is that, excuse me, the 12,800 gain stage, it's getting it that clean because it is being hammered with internal camera noise reduction that you cannot turn off. And in fact, the Sony A7S3 and that line of sensors, so that the FX3, FX6, well, not the FX6 because you can turn off noise reduction in FX6, but A7S3, FX3, even at their base native ISO, which is 640, it still has noise reduction being applied. And you can actually see this if you were to grade an S-Log3 at 640 ISO and then have the same exposure in one of the other baked in profiles that will allow you to dump that native ISO down a lot lower. And so if you're going like 100, 200 ISO, it will be sharper at that 1 or 200 ISO. And a lot of that's because it already has that noise reduction being built in and added to even at the native 640 gain stage. Okay. And the other problem with the A7S3 FX3 for real estate, or really anything for that matter, is the noise that it does have is ugly noise. It's big, blotchy chroma noise, and you've got color noise like all over the place with it. And when I shoot real estate with the A7S3, and that is the camera that I have shot more real estate with than I've shot. I don't know, probably at least 100 homes, right? With the A7S3, I'm shooting it with real estate, at least 100 homes. Um, you're going to have noise reduction is going to be part of your workflow with that camera. There's no way to crush the blacks, crush the shadows enough and still make it look like a nice home for sale and place to be without noise reduction. And that's something that, especially with R5C, where if you want to capture in 8K 60, you can descale a lot of that noise. Understanding C-Log 2 is also noisy. Where I think A7S III is probably the best tool for real estate video still, and I'll give it props. I think it is. And why I think that is, there's a couple of reasons why I think that is. One is because the highlight roll off is really nice and soft on the A7S III. So it is like cinema camera soft. And it's just the way that the knee on the highlights doesn't clip. And so if you look at the waveform, there isn't any high shelf where the point of no return and is kind of like yeah, kind of just goes like red cameras like that too, right? It has a really nice high, soft high roll off, regardless of if it can discern whatever super wide information over whatever IRE value. How it approaches that is really nice and pleasing looking. The A7S III is really good at that. The other thing I think the A7S III is really good at is the tracking autofocus is the best in the game. So with the A7S III, I can, to keep away from doing very smeary noise reduction, I can tap to track on the screen of the camera, keep my iris on my lens very wide open. Now, this is obviously a full frame camera, so that means your depth of field is going to be getting shallower, but I can track something accurately enough that I can still control that shallow depth of field and get a lot of light into the sensor without having to crank up my ISO and therefore add so much more noise to it. So I agree. All these cameras are different, and really when it comes down to it, you can learn how to use any of them. But the A7S III, I do believe is still the best video camera for real estate video, because it's the combination of those things. It's the high soft highlight roll off and it's the tracking system that just it can't be beat on that camera. It's the best in the game that I've tried anyway. Okay, Brandon Brody, C70 does have better dynamic range. Yeah, it does. But I don't want to lug a larger cinema camera to every house unless the R5C gets C-Log 2 10-bit update. I, I don't I don't know if you can contain C-Log 2 in 10-bit, can you? I don't know. Either way, yeah, no, I hear you. The reason that I don't want to lug the C70 around is because I really want to try to have. So part of my changeover here, going from Canon to Sony to Canon, is I was never able with Sony to simplify my loadout to two bodies, right? I would have the A1 for stills. A1 isn't an especially good video camera. I think that's what a lot of people don't realize is like they say, oh, the A1, it shoots 8K and shoots, it can do 4K 60. But it's not really a great video camera. It really isn't. And there are a lot of reasons why. One of the reasons I don't like is the same reason that I do like it for stills photography. The screen tilts out instead of the flippy screen. Um, for video, that sucks because when something has a tracking autofocus, I want to be able to use the tracking autofocus. And with a camera with a screen that only tilts out like that, that screen is being blocked by the rear gimbal motor. And so it's kind of awkward to try to use. And so the A7S III is, that's one of the reasons it's better. But my point is, I never was able to figure out a good two camera system for using Sony for my daily loadout. It was always the A1 for stills, the A7S III for video, and then the A7 IV I was using as a backup to either if I need it. Now, if I was using the C70, so let's say I had the R5, right, or the R5C or whatever as my main stills camera, and then I'm loading out the C70 to do video. C70 doesn't take photos. And it's like, oh, you can maybe screen grab or something, but I can't trigger strobes with it, and so it's not the right tool for me on the daily, so I can right now, okay, my thought is probably a pair of R5Cs. And R5C is a camera that I don't like a whole lot, but I have one. I got stuck with it. It was past my return window. I was able to return the R5 at the time, R5C. But since I made that video about how I'm stuck with it, and I still think I am, by the way, because I'd probably rather have a pair of R5s. But I might get another R5C and have a pair of R5Cs, and one of them dedicated for video, one of them dedicated for stills, and then they are each other's backup in the van. And Sony doesn't have a camera that I feel comfortable doing that with, like the R5C. So that's kind of an interesting thing. I don't want to deal with large 8K raw files just to shoot real estate video. I don't keep the raw files anyway. I don't mind dealing with raw files because I don't keep them. I will edit a video and I will delete the raw files. Um, after a period of time, they've already done it. And here's the thing that's good about real estate is, one, real estate media, whether it be photo, video, whatever, is very transient, right? I mean, it's only these things only live really for a month or two, a few, if the agent's using it to brand themselves and such, could last for a little bit longer. But I can't think of, I mean, so to put it in perspective, I shoot 300 or 400 homes a year. A lot of them have video, a lot of them don't. And I've been doing it about 5 years now. I don't think I have ever re-edited a video and needed the raw files past a couple weeks out ever. So, and the other good thing about real estate is not only is it transient, but you can go back and do it again if you need to. It's not like a wedding where like you may kiss the bride. That happens one time, right? You better get it. So yeah, I dump raw files. I don't keep them. I'm into Sony and Blackmagic, too deep. But if I were a Canon guy, I remember Sid, you said this on. I would have bought two C100s as well. That deal is stupid good. Now, if you're into Blackmagic, C200 is actually a Canon EF mount, and that's the only reason that I had a few EF lenses hanging around is because I have a Blackmagic Pocket 6K as well, which I might be selling, by the way, if anybody's interested in that. Let's see, because I just don't find myself using it that much. Mystery Bar, good to see you. How do you feel about the R3 and the R5C? I have both, but I can still return them. I'm a chef and I'm doing cooking videos, so I personally don't know if it's overkill or not. What would you recommend? Boy, um, yeah, that's a very different use case than mine. The R3, one of the big failures I think with the R5C, everybody knows about the battery thing, and that's a thing. But the other thing with R5C is you cannot wirelessly tether in video modes unless you were to buy the $1,000 Wi-Fi battery grip. Now with R3, I believe you still can tether wirelessly so you can control the camera settings. And so let's say you're a chef, so I'm assuming you're filming yourself preparing food. Um, if the camera can be, where mine is right here, but you can still wirelessly control things about the camera filming. With the R3, you can do that. With the native Canon app, with the R5C, you cannot. So if I were in your position, I would think really hard about that. Is the R5C and the R3 overkill for what you're doing? I don't know. It depends on how heavy you want your production to be. I don't think so, but only you can say that. C70 has better latitude performance than the Sonys, but you're right. On Brandon on lightweight and low light, I can see why for real estate there would be better options. Yeah, I haven't used a C70 for real estate, so I guess I don't know. I know that because I have used other Canon cinema cameras, like now the C200, the R5C, which is there's, I know that the Sony um, focusing system is way better than anything I've ever seen from Canon. And that's comparing, the A7S III, the A7 IV, the Alpha One, the Canon R5, the Canon R5C, the C200. So unless the C70 really diverges from that, and I don't think it does, that's why I think that's a big reason why I think the A7 S3 is the best camera for real estate because, like I said, I can tap and track and have it do that reliably to something within the scene, which allows me to keep my iris nice and big, wide open, get a lot of light in. Carlos Quintero, hey Brian, hey Carlos. And Carlos also says hi to everyone. He's traveling today. I invited him to be part of this. He says, "No, dude, I'm traveling." What's up, James Jackson? All right, you guys are talking. Sid's saying hi to everyone here. Carlos, it's true. YouTube reviewers don't understand what it means to have these tools day in and day out, real workflow. So, that's really the thing, man. Like, how do you get a list of, items that deep? It's not because I'm shooting YouTube videos. I could shoot YouTube videos with a quarter of that, a fifth of that. It's because I'm out there working, and it's and the other part of that is I didn't just go out and buy all of this stuff. I mean, I've collected this stuff over the years as I'm doing different jobs, and and different things are good for the different jobs, but it ends up being a pile of money, you know. Carlos, King Crook Gaming, talking to Carlos after hearing Shane last night. I'm feeling pumped, maybe enough to buy a Raptor. I don't know what that is. I'm gonna have to. I wouldn't buy a Raptor though. But they're okay. Now you guys, now he's agreeing. Okay, now I'm gonna have to figure out what you guys are talking about. Raptors are expensive, man. Unless you're talking about the truck. Oh wait, then it's still expensive. Panasonic is starting to do some big things for a small price. Yeah, Panasonic's kind of a. I don't think anybody really pays attention to Panasonic. I don't know if they're worth paying attention to. But maybe. I think you're right though. I think they're making some interesting moves. Brandon Brody, James 100% agrees. Still, the FX3A7S is the best tool for real estate videos. I think so too. If for no other reason than the tracking and like I said, the highlight roll. The C70 I think does have better actual latitude. So I think James is right about that. But it doesn't have some of the other really nice features. It's the tracking's not there. It's not full frame unless you use the speed booster, and that could create some other problematic in some other areas. There's many benefits to YouTube and content creators when it comes to giving options to do what you want with in your life, but the biggest downside is money skews perception as well. And I think that's why that a lot of the YouTube audience around the camera community being beginners, I think that's where it becomes problematic. Is for people who've been doing this a long time, we can discern the difference. I think a lot of our typical audiences cannot. You know, Unfortunately, B&H isn't going to be able to sell their Dragon X kits, and I think that's exactly what's going on with the C200. Is they, I see them, put those Dragon X kits on fire sale, and they blast them too. Like they make it on their landing page and stuff when they do it, and I still don't think they can get rid of them. Chasing money views instead of being consistent with quality helpful videos. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Dragon sensor cameras are at crazy discounts on the secondary market. I know. I sold one. You know what I got? Okay, so I paid brand new for the Dragon X 6K $20,000, which at the time was a sale. Because it was like 22.5 or whatever it was typically. $20,000. Used it 2 years, 2 or 3 years or so. In that period of time, Komodo had come out, and I think yeah, when I sold it, Raptor had just come out. I got $7,000 for it. Right. So I took it in the shorts on that one. Um, if I were to do it differently, I don't know. I can't say that I wouldn't have bought that camera, um, because it taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about how actual cinema cameras are different than stills cameras, than like mirrorless cameras pretending to be cinema cameras. And there is a difference. And when you pick up a red, um, especially an older like a DSMC2 red, and start using it, you learn those differences in a hurry. Yeah. Okay. They like to make fun of drama, Tony and Chelsea. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not. I don't think they're caffeinated cameras. Good to see you. Just like the passive aggressive approach. Just likes the passive aggressive approach. Very classy. Who, me? All right. Cool. Right on. Let's see. Noise with the A7S3 sucks. It does, and it's not necessarily that it's like really noisy is that the noise is really ugly. So you can so it's really apparent when it is noisy, you know? If anyone wants a better understanding of true dynamic range of many modern cameras, GAFTA Gear just posted a really great blog on their website. Yeah, I'll check that out. Very technical, but a great read nonetheless. You know, I would say if anybody wants a true understanding of the dynamic range of their camera, go shoot real estate. You know, I mean, go shoot some interior video because that's the most dynamic thing that I've ever found. You know, and so it's a good way to be able to test out dynamic range of cameras. When you have, okay, a room like this that I'm in, which is very dark, and let's say it's high noon outside, and I've got nuclear window light blowing in. Oh, you'll find out in a hurry whether your camera's good at dynamic range or not. Let's see. Because we are lighting, you know, it's run what you brung, you know, and you run through this thing. TLDR, all cameras outside of 5 to 6 sensor cameras, half those RE cameras in the Venice have a max of 12 true stops of dynamic range. Yeah, you know, and I think as far as like you know, the total dynamic range conversation, to me, that doesn't matter as much as how it treats um the highlights and the black point at the limits, you know. So how much noise am I getting versus how clean are those shadows? And the same thing with the highlights. You know, is there a nice soft roll off versus is there a hard knee? So I don't care if a camera has 10 stops of dynamic range or 15 stops of dynamic range, as long as the highlights don't look video-y, you know, and as long as the noise is able to be dealt with, you know, or if I can shoot high enough resolution and acquisition that I can then descale the noise in post. So to me, total dynamic range doesn't matter one bit. You know, it's what the image behaves like at those limits, at the high limit and at the low limit that matters more to me. Main reason I don't like A7S3 is noise. Yeah, I'm shooting the highest codec SI still has a boatload of noise. It does. You know, noise reduction is always in my workflow with A7S3, 100% of the time. The other cameras that have 13 or better is C70, C300 Mark III, the Varicams for Panasonic, and the Fujifilm X-H2. I know the Fujifilm one apparently is supposed to be really good. You know, it's I don't want to go down that road because I don't need another system versus the, you know, two or three or however many I got now that I'm straddling. Agree with everything you're saying, but for shooting videos with FX3A7S, I would never shoot a house not at its not at its native ISOs. Yeah, and maybe shoot at 12,800 5% of the time. And that's I agree with you. And that's exactly why I say that the tracking on the A7S3 is so important because it allows me to stay at that native 640 ISO. You know, I can then open up the iris to 2.8 f4. But if I'm tracking, let's say, something near the back wall of the home, um, the shot is pretty much all going to look like it's in focus still. You know, even if I get that much, and that's really why, because I want to stay at that native ISO. Absolutely agree. You know, that is important with that camera to stay at the native base if you can. I don't like going over about 1,000. No realtor is going to notice the 12,800 ISO has heavy noise reduction. Let's be honest, that's true, but there's a color shift there too. So, you know, everything does get warmer. They might notice that. Have you noticed the R5C has had very few updates? I have noticed that. I'm waiting for them to update it so you can actually monitor in video. And then, you know, my advice to the chef there might be a little bit different. I'm half expecting a pretty big update at the conference in February. That'd be great. R62 seemed to add the cinema menu quick screen. Fix the switch delay fix. Yeah, the switch delay fix isn't a big deal for me because I don't know if I have. The jobs that I have don't typically involve me switching from photo to video, you know, on the fly really quickly. I know that some people do work like that, and so the switch delay and what he's talking about for those of you who don't know is the R5C has two completely separate modes, one for photo, one for video. And the toggle switch that turns on the camera, you flip it one way for photo and one way for video. And if you flip it all the way from photo to video or vice versa, there's like a 7 or 8 second delay or something like that. And that's people who use that both. Did I get all of your comment there? I think I did. People who use it like that they don't like the delay on the switch. My biggest thing is I would love to be able to monitor it wirelessly without using a $1,000 battery grip. I think that's stupid, especially since you can already do it in photo mode. All the Wi-Fi radio, everything is already on board. So I'd love to see them find a way to implement that into it. I have the Blackmagic 4K. I have the Blackmagic 6K, the OG one, not the one with the NDs and stuff. And I just don't use it a lot anymore. I have three Blackmagic 4Ks with speed booster, F mount, so no. Oh, okay. So that makes sense then. Okay. So you're not using EF lenses on them. You're using speed boosting other lenses. Those B&H Dragons need to come with 5 mini mags. Man, it's a deal. Mini mags of shortage is what's kept me away from picking up a used Monstro. Carlos and I have had that conversation before too, man. I at one point bought a 900, it's a strange denomination. It's like 960 gig mini mag used for 1,800 bucks. It is insane what the mini mags cost, right? So and that's another reason, like the Komodo came out and used CFast 2 cards, which aren't like cheap, but they're not 1,800 bucks used for 960 because brand new they're like 2,600 or something crazy like that. It's insane. The types of peripherals that you need for the DSM-C2 Reds, because everything's like that too. Everything for the DSM-C2 ecosystem is all very proprietary, very exotic, and very expensive. Everything for them is like that, and so it's a big problem with that implementation. And I think Red did a good job with the newer cameras, kind of going to more pedestrian types of systems with their cameras. They've made a lot more deals with other third-party manufacturers for monitors and things like that, and so that's something that that's good. Mystery Bar, I understand. I had A7 as the chef. I had an A7S3 for my main cam and Sony ZV-1 for top down, but I didn't know much, and I returned them for Canon. Watching YouTubers who don't do what I do was influencing my decisions. Um, A7S3 for main cam and Sony ZV-1 for top down. I think that would be a pretty good setup. I mean, I'm not faulting you for returning them and going for something else. I spent so much money on gear, and now I feel like I can go cheaper for what I do. I think so too. And here's the thing, and this is the thing, this I think is an important point to bring up. Um, so many beginners around the photography space focus on cameras, and cameras on YouTube is what gets the clicks. And so that's a lot of the content that you're consuming about photography on YouTube is about cameras. If you were to take half of that time that you're looking at cameras and instead look at lighting, you would be a lot better off, because that is the biggest jumps that your photography and your videography and your production and everything, the biggest jumps in quality that they are ever going to make has very little to do with the camera that you're using, has everything to do with how you are lighting or how you are understanding lighting. So that's and framing, lighting and framing, but I would say, focus on lighting, and as a beginner, it's going to teach you a lot. Watch other types of art. Let's see, exactly, that's the funny thing. Mystery Bar, the more you learn and know, the more you realize you can do with a lot less. That's true. You can. And part of this switch for me is downsizing. Okay, Mystery Bar. I purchased my camera because a couple of YouTubers, not going to mention them, was speaking highly, so I bought them, and they sold them a couple weeks after. Yeah, so vicious. Wow, 7,000 grand. You got raped. Yeah, the SMC too. But like you said, living there, I know, and that's the thing. Like those things are they're and, I mean, here's the thing too, like the Dragon X is a great camera. It really is. It's but for the way that I like to work nowadays, um autofocus is becoming more important to me. than it ever was. And that's one of the reasons that I don't use the Blackmagic is Pocket 6K anymore either, is because it doesn't have autofocus on board. So the Dragon X it's a full manual camera, whereas the Komodo has autofocus and it has a face tracking or yeah, face tracking via the app autofocus on board now too. Is oh, missed one here. Let's see. I purchased my cameras because a couple of YouTubers go. Oh, I already did that one. Okay. And Mr. Barr, when they get called out in a video, they call us haters. I think Carlos is just over here like stirring the turds, That's okay. Let's see. I am almost through the comments here. Red making the change to third-party accessories, allowing Red to sell a lot more cameras. It really is. That's one of really the biggest thing about the DSM C2s is they are so proprietary and so expensive. Everything that you do with DSM C2 ecosystem is just, you know. Perch to still have R5C because I saw your video and everything you mentioned was true, and I really thank you for that. You know what, Mr. Rebar, R5C is a fantastic camera. And I have been one of those people who have kind of bagged on the R5C in the past, but that's splitting hairs, and it's splitting hairs with somebody who uh, has a lot of other tools to choose from, and so I can afford to be a little bit pickier and say, oh, this tool's better for this and that tool's better for that, but there's nothing wrong with the R5C, you know. Thanks, bro. Okay. Uh, James Jackson, best investment jumps his lenses and lights and lighting modifiers, 100% absolutely, you know, and that's why I started out too saying you're going to marry the lenses. The lenses are going to they're going to go with you, wherever with different cameras. They change all the time, so just don't focus on cameras. Okay. Don't talk about lighting. Just bought a bunch of stuff from different brands, each with their own apps. You know what I do, man? I honestly, so I have my YouTube set up, and this is I want to make this as efficient as possible right here, right? So I actually have one switch, and then all the different lights that I have, and there's like 5 or 6 of them in here. Um, each of them I have put in here because they feature a mode where as soon as they receive power, they power on to the last settings I used. And so I can flip a couple switches and be tracking, and I don't mess with the apps, man. I don't want to complicate things, and it goes back to simplifying. When you're on set, the more complicated, when you start like, oh, I need this app to do this and that's just, you know what? I want buttons and knobs, man. I want buttons and knobs. I want things to recall settings where I left them last, and I power them on, and here they come on, you know. And I don't use lights a whole lot on my professional work. I'm doing real estate, which I'm using strobes and stuff like that. But on I don't do a ton of video production. I do, but I don't do enough of it that something like that really makes a big difference to me. Aputure is making a Citus DMX app, basically. Any of your lights says, yeah, DMX is that's the way to do that. Composition and sound is key. Sound is a whole nother ballgame, and a lot of times it's more difficult than video. What about lenses? Do you think the lenses would be better than cheaper lenses for cooking? Yeah, I think better lenses are better for everything. And cooking and it's yeah, your lenses are again, going back to, you spend if you spend the money on lenses, it's never a bad investment. Ever, ever. Uh, you can get away with, and you could probably find on YouTube people who do, is cheap camera body with a nice lens versus a nice camera body with a cheap lens. The one with the nice lens always is better. It always looks better. So yeah, spend your money on lenses, not on camera bodies. Carlos is the Mike Tyson of cinema YouTube. Backs up and he says, with actual experience, no hidden agenda, straightforward, never backs down. It's, he's all of those things. Okay. And L lenses. Uh, L lenses, yeah. L lenses are, Carlos and I actually got into this on a recent live stream of his where we were talking about the whole third-party lenses debacle, that's been going on with people. And he says, look, here's the thing. This is Carlos talking. He says, I've never had a problem with a Canon L lens. Um, he has a $5,000 Zeiss lens, a Zeiss Otis lens that has had a problem. Never had a problem with a Canon L lens, you know, and my experience, you know, echoes that. I've never had a problem with a Canon L lens. So, never had a problem with them. They're robust. They take a beating and they they last forever. So I think I got through all the comments here. And I've been on it for hour and 10 and I heard the children arrive back home, so I'm gonna call it a day here. Okay, thank you so much for answering my questions. Hey, no problem, Mr. Bar, anytime, bud. So it's good to have you around. Where are you, by the way? Because it's like you don't get a body like this eating carrots, right? So if you're near me, I gotta go try your cooking. Hometown try. I appreciate you, brother. So, all right. Well, I will catch y'all soon. Thanks, Carlos. Yeah, I'd love to have you join next time. So I'm gonna, next time, so I got this streaming software here, and I've used it a few times, and I'm able to, like you